Hey there, internets. So, recording this very late for a Saturday night rant. However, we got some stuff important on the. It's not really a Saturday night rant. On the short term for the hometown team here in Washington, SB5599 was passed by both the House and the Senate. I believe it's on its way to the governor. And they may have to deal with some amendments. I'm not sure. However, as it stands now, it's passed both houses, and it's bad. It's the one that they've actually come out now and spelled out that protected health care services in it via one of the amendments is minors getting abortions if they run away from home, turn up at a shelter and say they're looking for protected health care services, or sex changes for kids. So they're deliberately and very clearly undermining the parents. What you need to do, and I will include all the links, as always, in the description below, contact the governor's office and say, do not sign this. Even if you think sex changes for kids is okay, even if you think abortion is okay, if you're a parent and you love your kids, you at least want to be a part of that decision. And the problem is that this is trying to make parents not a part of that decision. And whether you think it's okay or not, the last thing anyone wants is a 15-year-old girl becomes pregnant, gets an abortion, wakes up 2 days later and realizes, what did I just do? Or a person that thinks they may have gender dysphoria goes and starts taking cross-sex hormones without their parents being able to object or know about it, and realizing that they didn't want that, and that those drugs have now left them sterile and unable to have children. There's too much of this stuff where I'm also going to be talking about some actions the Missouri Attorney General is taking here in a bit. But this is the most pressing thing. If you don't listen to any more of this video, at least take care of this. And then like, share, and subscribe. Because this bill, we haven't been able to stop it yet. We have one more chance, and that's to somehow convince this guy that's in Olympia that this is a bad idea, and I don't have a lot of faith in that. But if you don't try, you definitely know what the answer is. So the links will be in the description below, both to the bill if you want to read it in particular, and the amendments that were adopted, and a page where you can go straight to sending a message to the governor. So the next thing, of course, I'm just going to say this, and I'm going to probably do some other stuff related to the Anheuser-Busch thing. The Anheuser-Busch boycott still on. They have had a non-apology thing. It was mealy-mouthed. I don't care what Donald Trump Jr. said about leaving them alone. This has gone on longer than 72 hours, so they have not survived the 72-hour news cycle. Keep up the pressure. Do not buy any of their products. I'll have some other ideas. I'm just going to leave it at that. But the CEO of the company said, as CEO of a company founded on America's heartland more than 165 years ago, I am responsible for ensuring every consumer feels proud of the beer we brew. We're honored to be part of the fabric of this country. Anheuser-Busch employs more than 18,000 people, and our independent distributors employ an additional 47,000 valued colleagues. We have thousands of partners, millions of fans, and proud history supporting our communities, military, first responders, sports fans, and hardworking Americans everywhere. We've never intended to be part of a discussion that divides people. We are in the business of bringing people together over a beer. My time serving this country taught me the importance of accountability and the values upon which America was founded: freedom, hard work, and respect for one another. As CEO of Anheuser-Busch, I am focused on building and protecting our remarkable history and heritage. I deeply care about this country and company, our brands and partners. I spend much of my time traveling across America, listening to and hearing from our customers and distributors and others. Moving forward, I will continue to work tirelessly to bring great beers to consumers across our nation. Great. So fire the gal that just made this decision to put a man, pretending to be a man, pretending to be a woman, on a beer can. You have shown no accountability. You didn't even say, hey, I have command responsibility. I was captain of the ship. I'm resigning. You're not doing that. You're not firing her. No one is being held responsible for this. You are not listening because people are giving you the ultimate message with how they go about purchasing your product, which is not. You see a lot of anecdotal evidence, but there's a lot of anger over this. I didn't drink Bud Light before. I would have usually, on occasion, buy other products by Anheuser-Busch. I'm not buying those, so keep that up. And I'm just going to leave that subject to that because something a little more in depth is, move my links here. Missouri's Attorney General, this is from Business Insider, reposted by Microsoft on my Microsoft Start page the other day. Missouri's Attorney General opened a new front in the GOP as attacks on transgender people, banning treatment for any adult with depression. That's just the straight quote. It's not a GOP attack. It's trying to protect people from, in some cases, from very bad actors who have an interest in promoting that kind of treatment. The article brings up Missouri's Attorney General announced new requirements for adults seeking gender-affirming care. Adults with depression are banned from seeking care until that mental health issues are resolved. Other requirements include 3 consecutive years of gender dysphoria and months of therapy. How is any of that controversial? I mean, you could maybe make a separation of powers argument in Missouri, but how is any of that controversial? If somebody's got depression or some other issue, autogynephilia, they got obviously depression. If they have other mental health issues, shouldn't we deal with that to make sure that what they're thinking is gender dysphoria isn't one of those things? Just straight up. 3 consecutive years of gender dysphoria and months of therapy. Shouldn't that be what we should start first before a radical surgery or cross-sex hormones that can permanently alter your body? What kind of insane extremist do you have to be to think that's controversial? You are an extremist if you think that's controversial at all. And it's an emergency regulation. This is where you get into this possible separation of powers issue. The emergency regulation announced by Missouri's Attorney General on Thursday could severely limit access to gender-affirming care in the state, setting several new requirements for trans adults seeking treatment. It also talks about young people as well. I'm going to actually go through some of the actual order because I went and looked it up. Because that's my thing, is I'm going to go straight to the source and not just what they're saying here. Attorney General Andrew Bailey's sweeping regulations would prohibit medical providers from providing gender-affirming care unless a number of requirements are met. Again, when you go through all of them, none of them should be controversial. While some of the regulations requirements are specified by age group, the most expansive provisions, including 3-year delay in care, would be in place regardless of the patient's age. When I was much younger and I'd heard about some of this stuff, I thought you had to at least a year of living as an opposite gender before they would do any kind of surgery or hormones or any of that. And now it's like, some people go in and they're just like they don't even want to mess with trying to look at other options. It's just start writing you prescriptions for cross-sex hormones. ACLU and Lambda Legal issued a statement promising legal action against the Attorney General and emergency regulation will defend the rights of transgender people through any necessary legal action, just as we have done in other states engaging in this anti-science, discriminatory fear-mongering. There's literally no science showing that this is beneficial. When people talk about do you want to have a trans kid or a dead kid? And it's like, that is literally emotional blackmail that you do to parents. There's no evidence that suicide rates get lower. And if you're not improving the situation, it's not working. The statement added, the Attorney General's so-called emergency rule is based on distorted, misleading, and debunked claims and ignores the overwhelming body of scientific and medical evidence supporting this care, as well as medical experts and doctors who work with transgender people every day. Then why did Finland ban it? Why have European countries said no cross-sex hormones for minors or for those before puberty? Why? Because the evidence isn't supporting the other side. This is all mealy-mouthed garbage about trying to claim the scientific side, and it's not supported. The ACLU of Missouri has previously said the Attorney General, a Republican, overstepped his authority when it condemned Bailey's initial announcement of the policy in March. The state Attorney General is basing his regulation on a law aimed at fraudulent business practices. The Missouri Independent reported, during the first months since being appointed Missouri's Attorney General, Andrew Bailey has politicized his office by inserting himself into the highly coordinated administrative, legal, and alt-right media-driven attacks on transgender youth. It isn't alt-right. I have my issues with the alt-right because most of them aren't conservative. They're race-obsessed, but they're, when you're supporting... when Richard Spencer's supporting Biden because Biden was for universal health care, that's not conservative. Promo, an LGBTQ public policy and advocacy organization in the state, said in response to the regulation, his actions today fanned the flames of hate by including transgender adults' ability to access care in his culture war. The proposal includes 2 potential year-plus delays in care if a medical provider cannot document previous care. Again, how is that controversial? The provider will need to show the patient has a medically documented, long-lasting, persistent, intense pattern of gender dysphoria for at least the three most recent consecutive years before seeking treatment, and they have received a full psychological or psychiatric assessment over the last 18 months consisting of at least 15 hours worth of therapy. How is that controversial? Why is that unnecessary? Why is that detrimental? Sounds like a pretty good idea to me. Adults with depression or other mental health issues would not be able to receive gender-affirming care until those existing issues have been treated and resolved. Again, why is that? Where's the problem here? They would need to be screened for autism. That does not prohibit a sex change. Before care could be administered, the regulation requires that parents or guardians provide a 23 bullet-pointed list of reasons questioning gender-affirming care, citing international restriction studies and journal articles. As the Missouri Independent Journal pointed out, most of the studies cited were later revised after academics questioned its methodology. One of the studies was later revised. Republicans and conservatives have moved to restrict gender-affirming care and other trans rights in recent years. GOP governors in Indiana and Idaho just signed into law bans on minors receiving such care last week, which is absolutely what they should be doing. Bailey's restrictions on adult care may signal a new wave of restrictions to come. The regulation starts way at the beginning, gives its purpose, an emergency statement. I'm not going to go through that whole thing, but there have been growing situations. There was a whistleblower, I think in Cincinnati, it might have been St. Louis, where a trans woman or non-binary person who worked there said kids were coming in, like multiple kids from the same class, and I'm going to point out some of the things in here that they're screening for, where multiple kids that know each other all coming in saying they suddenly have gender dysphoria, and they basically shuttle the kids off to a particular psychotherapist who already has a form letter created to be able to just plunk the kid's name in and says they've got gender dysphoria so they can start giving them hormones. But after going through all of the whys and what fors, covered gender, and there, of course, will be a link in the description below. Covered gender transitions or intervention means provision or prescription of any puberty-blocking drugs, cross-sex hormones, or surgery for the purpose of transitioning gender, decreasing gender incongruence, or treating gender dysphoria does not include, and it starts talking, and it does not include genetic or biochemically verifiable disorder development, such as, and give some examples of various chromosomal issues. It says 46XX DSD, 46XY DSD, sex chromosome DSDs, XX or XY sex reversal, or ovotesticular disorder, treatment for precocious puberty, which is what puberty blockers are for. And then if you've already begun intervention, you can continue it. And this is unfair, deceptive, fraudulent, or otherwise unlawful practice for any person or health organization to provide covered gender transition interventions for a patient, such as or refer such a patient for intervention if the person or health organization fails to assess whether the patient continues to have gender dysphoria, fails to obtain informed consent, and this is your 23 bullet points about issues about these drugs are experimental for minors. They have been recognized by medical. The use of puberty blocker drugs and cross-sex hormones to treat gender dysphoria has been recognized by medical authorities in Europe after independent reviews to be experimental and lacking sufficient evidence, and has been substantially restricted in countries such as Sweden, Finland, Norway, and the United Kingdom. So some other countries are already figuring this out, and apparently they can't figure it out here. You've got to remember, in this country, because of our medical system, they make profit off of this stuff. There is a lack of current evidence-based guidance for care of children and adolescents who identify as transgender, particularly regarding benefits and harms of pubertal suppression, medical affirmation with hormone therapy, and surgical affirmation. You only need to look at Jazz Jennings as an example. Jazz Jennings is going through some bad stuff right now. A study spanning 5 decades of almost 5,000 transgender people who had received cross-sex hormones, regardless of treatment type, nevertheless showed a 2-fold increase in mortality risk. And there's a whole list of things. There's no evidence of suicidal issue. A study of 1,600 parents found that the children were worse off after transition. A whole host of stuff with that. And that you can read it yourself. For time, I'm not going to read every last bit of it. Some of the other fails too. And it does say, fails to ensure that for at least the 3 most recent consecutive years, the patient has exhibited a medically documented, long-lasting, persistent, and intense pattern of gender dysphoria. So a 15-year-old would have to come in and start by 18. You'd have to start at 15. And that's too young as far as I'm concerned. It fails to ensure the patient has received a full psychological and psychiatric assessment consisting of not fewer than 15 separate hourly sessions, at least 10 of which must be with the same therapist over the course of not fewer than 18 months to explore the developmental influences on the patient's current gender identity and to determine, among other things, whether the person has any mental health comorbidities. How is that controversial? How is that restricting someone's rights? You take the example of my friend I call my favorite witch. Her daughter started saying she was a boy. Mom was picking up on what was coming and was like, no, this is a girly girl. And so she said, you're not doing permanent things. Within a month, she figured it out for herself that she wasn't. Okay? Fails to ensure that any psychiatric symptoms from existing mental health comorbidities of the patient have been treated and resolved. Wouldn't you want to treat that first to find out if maybe that takes care of the problem? Because you're still going to have those problems even if the person transitions. If you don't take care of those, the person may still suicide or have other issues. Fails to have a screening for autism. fails with respect to a patient who is a minor to ensure the patient has received comprehensive screening, at least annually, for social media addiction and compulsion, and has not for at least the last 6 months prior to beginning any intervention suffered from social media addiction or compulsion. Fails to ensure at least annually that the patient is not experiencing social contagion with respect to the patient's gender identity. This is where you've had these multiple girls from the same school, same class, all say they're transgender at about the same time. And my wife was talking about how she knew a couple of girls in school. One came out as a lesbian. Well, then her best friend decided she was a lesbian. After a few months, her friend decided, no, I'm not into that, and went back to dating guys. Young people are impressionable. They want to fit in. So if the one girl that they know is transgender, and you got to remember, they also all want to feel special. So if one person's getting a lot of attention because they're transgender, guess what kids will do? Then there's some rules about tracking these people to find out long-term effects. How is that controversial? Just saying, keep your data. And you have to maintain informed written consent. They have to, there's some of those any person or organization providing covered or gender transition to a patient referring to the patient for intervention shall document and retain such patient's records, a detailed description of compliance with the provisions of the section. So they have to maintain all their records to make sure they've complied also. How any of this is controversial is beyond me. Now, what kind of degenerate that thinks it's okay for kids to have sex changes? I don't know who those people are. I really hope none of them are on my Facebook friends list. But that's the details. You can read all the details. I didn't cover everything in the emergency regulation, but that's what we should be doing, as opposed to what Jay Inslee is likely to do and sign SB5599 unless we can talk him out of it. So that's what I got. As always, like, comment, share, and if you haven't, subscribe. But especially share this time, because if you've made it this far, you probably know how serious some of this is, and you want to make sure people know about SB 5599 and why it needs to be shot down. Until then, you all take care.